write JavaScript promises. What is promises in JavaScript? A promise is an object that returns a value which you hope to retrieve in the future but not now. A promise has three states: a pending state, a fulfilled state, and a rejected state. I know that it didn't make sense. Let me give you a real example. Suppose that you want to done with the learning JavaScript after 3 months. Here you have three choices. The first one is that you are learning JavaScript and you are during the learning of JavaScript. So here is this is the pending stage, and after 3 months you done with the learning JavaScript. This is the fulfilled states. And the last one, that you can't done with the learning JavaScript for some reasons after 3 months, which is rejected states. So to declare a promise, we're going to use a promise constructor. Let me declare a variable called complete and assign it to the constructor of the promise. So this is the constructor of the promise. So in the constructor, in the parameter of the promise, we have a callback function. So I'm going to type that callback function, and this function is known as the executor function in a promise. So this function also contains two functions. So those functions are resolve and reject. What are these resolve and reject? The resolve method is going to be run if everything is fine and you can done with the learning JavaScript after 3 months. And the reject method is going to run if you can't done with the learning JavaScript after 3 months. So let me declare here another variable called completed and assign it to the true. Now inside the executor function of the promise, we're going to write an if a condition. So we're going to say if completed, and the console here we're going to call the resolve method. And the resolve method we're going to say process completed or process succeed, and we're gonna write an else statement. In this we're gonna call the reject method. We're gonna say process failed. So now out of this, if I came and say console.log and pass the complete here, which hold the variable, which hold a promise with itself, save it in the console, go to the console. Here we have a promise object. This promise object, its states as a fulfilled. As you see here, it's telling me that fulfilled. And whenever it's fulfilled, because it's fulfilled, it ran the resolve method. With that resolve method had the value of process completed. So, but if I came here and set this as a false, save it, go to the browser, in the console we get again that promise object, and that promise object states as rejected, and that because it's rejected, it's going to call the rejected method, and that rejected method contains the value of process failed, and it's also this giving me this annoying error which is telling that the promise failed, and I really hate the errors. So I told you about that the promise has three states: pending, fulfilled, and rejected. But where is the pending? I'll show you now. So let me just cut out these. So I just cut out, and I'm gonna declare a set timeout. So I say set timeout, and in this set we're gonna call these sub with our located, or we're gonna pass inside the set timeout after the 3 seconds. Now if I save it and go to the browser after 3 seconds, what we get is the process failed, because we set this variable as a false, and this condition get false, and it's not going to run the resolve method. And in place of that, it's going to run the rejected method, and the rejected method has the value of process failed, and it's going to be run after 3 seconds. But if I came here and set this as a true and save it, go to the browser, we get the promise which is pending. Now after 3 seconds, if I call that complete variable which hold a promise inside itself, we get the promise with the states of fulfilled, and it's going to run the resolve method, which is promise completed. So hope it makes sense. But once a new promise is created, it's in pending states till it's resolve or reject. During that it's resolve or reject, we can do some stuff on. So let me declare a variable called promise here, and we're gonna assign it to the complete, which hold a promise here. Now if I pass the promise here and pass dot, and we're gonna get some methods here, the dot, then, and the catch. So what are these? We'll talk about the catch later. First let me talk about the dot then. So what is dot then? A dot then is used to schedule callback to execute when the promise successfully resolved or rejected. But most of the time, people are use the dot then to do stuff when a promise is resolved. This method has two parameters. The two parameters which are functions, the unfulfilled and unreject. So let me pass the dot in here, then we will talk about. Here, I'm gonna say a result. You can call it whatever you want. And we're gonna declare an arrow function here, and we're gonna say console.log and pass the result here. And save it, go to the browser. After 3 seconds, this promise resolve, and it's return, and it's going to run at this function at this dot then, and it's going to tell me that the promise completed, and this value came from the promise resolve, which passed in the result parameter. So we can handle the errors using this, using the second parameter of dot then. So here I'm gonna declare a variable, I'll call it a field, and assign it to an arrow function. This is not a variable, this is a parameter actually. We're gonna say console.log and pass the if field. So now here I'm gonna pass this to false to get we can run the reject method. Now if I save it, go to the browser, after 3 seconds we get process failed, and this handle it using the second parameter of dot then. So when we have a dot then method, we can chain it. So how can we do that? Here I'm gonna pass this dot then again here, and we're gonna say result. I don't know what should I call it. So here I'm gonna say console console.log and log and say result. Pass the result here, and we're gonna chain it with another dot then. Here we're gonna say we're gonna declare another arrow function, and in this arrow function we're gonna console.log and say I am chainable. And now if I save it, go to the browser. Here in the browser we get process failed, because this variable is set it as a false. Now if I came here and set it as a true here, save it, go to the browser, in the console of the browser we get process complete and I'm chainable. And here you see that it ran both of them. But what about the catch method that you saw before? A catch method is used to handle if the promise is rejected. Even though we can handle it using the dot then, but it's a good practice to handle it using the catch. So how can we handle it using the catch? Here I'm gonna pass dot catch, and inside this we're gonna say console.log, and you can pass log, and here we're gonna say process fail. And now I'm gonna set this as a false and save it, go to the browser. In the browser we get process failed, and it's all ignore these because this promise return rejected, and it's going to run, it's going to ignore these all dot then and catch those error using the process fail. So let's see some real example to it makes more sense. Here I'm gonna create a new file, a new JSON file. So say json.json, and in this JSON we're gonna declare an object, and in this we're gonna give it a property of description. And what we're gonna do here, we're gonna pass, if you can do it if you really love it. So now we wanted to fetch the data from this JSON file. Here is that we're gonna use the promises. So we're gonna use the fetch method. And what a fetch method is going to do, fetch is going, as it's clear from its name, is going to fetch the data from something from a JSON file normally. And here I'm gonna declare a variable, call it URL, and assign it to the json.json. And what we're gonna do, we're gonna fetch it. So what we wanted to fetch, we wanted to fetch from this URL. But before we fetch it, I'm gonna assign it to a variable called fetching and assign it to this fetch method or function. Now if I came here and say console.log and pass the fetching here, save it in the console, we get a promise object with a pending state. And now if I open it, it's going to tell that fulfilled. That means that we successfully fetch from this URL, and we wanted to get the data from this. Whenever this is a promise, we can call the .then, .catch, whatever possible to a promise. So here I'm going to say fetching .then, and as you see, it gives me access to the .then method. And this we're going to say response. This is just response. This is just a parameter, and we're going to call an arrow function, an arrow function, and in this we're going to say response .json. We're going to change it to the JSON. After we change it, we can call we can chain this .then, as I showed you before. And this we're going to say result. And in this result, we're going to say result dot, and we can get the data from this JSON file. We want to get the description. So here I'm going to pass this description. So now I should pass this in a console. So I say console.log and pass the result.description. Now if I save it in the console, we get a reference, a result is not defined. Again, I pass the result here. And we also can type the .catch here. So I say .catch, and in this .catch, we're going to handle the errors that will maybe occur in the future. So here, I'm going to pass the error, and in this error, we're going to say console.log and pass the error here. I can't type well. Now if I save it, go to the browser. In the browser we get, you can do it if you really love it. And here you see that we get this from this JSON file, which is really cool. And if something happened wrong, for example, we pass we gave it a wrong URL to this fetching, and now if I save it, this is going to run the fetch. So here you see that we get 44 not found, which that means that we can't get, we didn't give it a right URL, and it's going to return this error syntax and telling us that an unexpected token JSON at position 0. And this is just wrong, and you can type your custom error handler here. For example, here I'm gonna say something is wrong here. So now if I save it, go to the browser, here we get something is wrong. So this was from the promise. Hope it makes sense. If you like it, you can subscribe my channel and leave a like also. So see you in the next tutorial. Bye.